please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Hey, DFS fans, we haven't forgotten about you. AJ Scholz and I, Paul Bruno, the Statsman, are back with your daily fantasy sports picks with our thoughts ahead of tonight's schedule. A whole host of games on the board. AJ, you're going to take us through your best Draftkings picks, and I'll do the FanDuel story. Why don't you let us know who looks good to you on the Draftkings and why?
Well, I'll start with the fact that I'm going to go heavily on the Rangers tonight. I think, they're a team that's flying a bit under the radar because they're not necessarily a playoff team in a tough division, but they're minus 150 favorites according to DraftKings Sportsbook as they're going up against the Sabres tonight, who have been a pretty struggling team. So I have a heavy dose of the Rangers tonight, and that starts at the top with the guy, I'm going to look at, anytime goal scoring odds. So a player most likely to score a goal at any point in the game. And across the entire slate tonight, the lowest odds or best odds are Mika Zibanejad at 125 to score a goal. So I'm definitely going to have him in at center, 6,500. I pair him up as terms of the center complement with Vincent Trocheck, Carolina facing Nashville tonight, 6,300 for Trocheck. He's been a pretty decent, consistent producer. The rest of my Rangers come in the form of that first line and Pavel Buchnevich at 5,400, Alexis Lafreniere at 3,400. And I'll just dive into the rest of it from the Rangers. I'll use Keandre Miller, 3,500. He gets some power play minutes, not with the top unit. Adam Fox tapes that spot, but 3,500 is a discounted rate for a defenseman seeing power play time. And I'll go all the way through to Igor Shesterkin in net 7,900. I round out the rest of the lineups. My other winger, Andrei Feshnikov for the Carolina Hurricanes. His price has dipped to just 5,900 because he hasn't really been performing at peak levels. But this is a capable player who I expect can get out of his slump sooner rather than later. On defense, I'm going to try and ride the hot hand and use Chris Letang against the Philadelphia Flyers tonight. $6,000 for him. Really, again, he's been red hot of late, and I'm hoping that will continue. My utility spot, I'll go with the other side of the ice, and that's Jacob Vorasak for the Flyers, 5,100. This is a team that's been almost unstoppable of late, and they could get a boost to their top six here with Travis Konechny, a game-time decision. So that's how I build out my lineup. Again, a heavy dose of the Rangers tonight based on the fact that they are pretty significant favorites. They're not the biggest favorite tonight. That honor falls to the Montreal Canadiens, who are minus 265 to beat the Senators tonight. But at minus 150, the Rangers heavily favored, and so they're factoring in significantly in my DraftKings lineup.
And AJ, for those fans who listen to our main part of the podcast, they're knowing I'm a big Leaf booster, and the only thing hotter than Maple Leafs has been my performance in FanDuel. I've won my last 5 outings, so if you're laying money on what I'm talking about, as AJ did last week, you'll wind up in the winner's circle more often than not. I'm happy to say I'm on fire right now. I hope that continues. Though tonight, I must admit, I'm going with a bit of a contrarian play to what I might usually do. I'm looking heavily into the Carolina roster. They're on the second of back-to-backs, but I think they have a really soft touch tonight against Nashville on the road. So I've got 3 other players in my mix, along with a couple other players that make maybe more sense intuitively. So I'm starting it off with Sebastian Ajo at center. He's the guy that drives this offense as the number 1 pivot on this team and one of the more potent scoring lines in the NHL night in, night out. And I expect that he might be even more of a threat here tonight with any power play advantages that they get against a weak Nashville opponent. Braden Point is my other top pivot. He's having another fantastic year as the top guy at center for Tampa. They get disheveled Dallas roster as their opponent tonight. So 2 road centers atop my list. I switch up to a team that's at home tonight in Columbus, and I got a couple of their guys in my roster tonight as well. Patrick Laine's been on a really nice streak since he's donned Columbus colors, and I expect him to continue that against a lesser foe in Detroit that comes calling. I continue with the Carolina theme. Martin Netskach, a depth forward for Carolina who's scoring quite consistently, despite his $4,200 price tag. I'll take his points per game average in FanDuel play, which is north of 10 points a night. He's my low-end option to afford me to spend money elsewhere. I went cheap on the defense, AJ, but I picked up a couple of guys who are scoring regularly for their respective teams and playing big minutes, and I like their matchups tonight. I got Brett Pesce in Nashville to complete my Carolina stack, and I've got Nick Leddy, who I've talked about rediscovering his offensive game, facing an overwhelmed New Jersey squad. You panned them pretty good in your overall review of the Devils in our main broadcast. Cam Atkinson is the other Columbus Blue Jacket forward that I think is worth a pick tonight. He's playing on the same line as Patrick Laine, so I'm hoping that they have a good time together in a game that could be points night against the visiting Detroit team. I also find a way to get Ondrej Palat into my lineup for Tampa, so I've got 2/3 of their top line in the mix. Palat comes in at only $15,700. I think that's a bargain when you get to play with the likes of Stamkos and Point. In the Nets, a big game for Montreal tonight, AJ. Ottawa comes a-calling on their second of back-to-backs. You mentioned the lopsided line. I've got Carey Price priced in at $7,800. That's much lower than he would normally command. He's been struggling, but the chips are on the table for this club, and he needs to come up big for them tonight, and I think he will. So that's the way my team lines up. And I wonder, are you going to play my roster again?
Absolutely. You mentioned last week I used it. I obviously don't have too much faith in you, Paul. I only used it in the nickel lineup. But I forgot. I know some of our DFS listeners can probably relate to this. I forgot to go back and check FanDuel, and so I left UC Saros in, and he ended up not starting. Pekka Rennie got the start, and I still cashed. So left some money on the table with that one. That definitely stings. Lesson learned there to make sure I'm going back to check. But hey, you won me that 15 cents last week, Paul. I don't know what the conversion rate is into loonies, but so it's not breaking the bank, but a win's a win, right?
That is correct, my friend, and we wish all of our listeners good luck with their picks. A fine way to end today's show. Join us again next Tuesday for the following episode of Puckcast with Statsman and AJ. Don't forget, you can watch this all unfold on YouTube at RotoWire Hockey. So long for now, folks.
Please like our video and subscribe to RotoWire. Then go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.